Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Lauren. This is my little corner of the internet where I love to talk about all things horror and Halloween related. And since we are currently in the thick of October, Halloween season, which is the best time of the year, I thought it'd be a good opportunity to share for the very first time a lot of how I plan for my trips. And it's really interesting what lives at the intersections of Halloween, horror fandom, and travel. In this video, I'm going to be sharing with you just some pieces of advice, some suggestions when you're trying to add a little bit of Halloween vibes to your travel adventures. Whether you're out of town or you're in your local community, whether it's Halloween season or it's outside of that time of the year, there are a lot of opportunities to engage with those kind of vibes. When you think about traveling in the context of horror and Halloween, something that comes to mind for me is like escapism through books or movies, and then also trying to bring that same experience, or at least trying to replicate it, in our real lives. And one term that academics have coined and have talked about quite a bit within the travel industry is the term dark tourism. To my knowledge, dark tourism was a term coined by scholars in the mid-1990s. So this is not a new concept. It's something that if you just Google, you'll find a lot of people talking about this as dark tourism, or the more academic term, thanatourism. To put it in simple terms, dark tourism is basically people wanting to travel and visit or experience places, locations where dark, disturbing things have happened, whether mass death, tragedies, all of that is a part of that umbrella term of dark tourism. There are a lot of discussions within the travel communities, online, in academia, about the merits and pros of engaging in this kind of tourism. And then there's also a lot of critical conversations regarding the ethics behind being a dark tourist. The conversations about the ethics of dark tourism, whether it's within academia or more open public forums, is really around appropriate behavior at these sites, and also positionality of people, like who should be able to go to these sites. When do these experiences become more exploitative than educational? Is it okay to seek entertainment in these kind of places through this kind of tourism? Those are a lot of the questions there, and I'm not seeking to answer those necessarily, but to just have people consider when they're trying to experience things that you probably would be reading through a fictional book. We're dealing with real people here when we're going to visit these locations. I have a few best practices that I always like to keep in the front of my mind when I'm planning all my trips. For me, that's thinking about my positionality to whatever history or site I am wanting to visit. I also am really conscious about when it might be appropriate or when it won't be appropriate to take videos or photos at certain sites and locations. And then I think most importantly, above all, a best practice for me when I'm visiting any site that I think is spooky or going to be full of Halloween or horror vibes is to really assess who is telling me information that is supposed to be educational to me, that I'm supposed to be learning from, who is teaching me, and do they have the proper credentials to be educating me on this topic. The first suggestion I'd like to give you is just a brief list of some websites that have helped me time and time again find awesome, fun activities or experiences or sites to visit. The first one is going to be the amazing Atlas Obscura. Basically, anywhere in the world you want to find a really weird or macabre site or location, it's all on there with addresses, a little bit of historical background. It'll tell you when things are permanently or temporarily closed with some photographs too. The first thing I ever do when I'm planning my itinerary is to search the location I am going to be traveling to on that website, and then just compile a list of some things I think would be interesting. Another great place to look is Eventbrite. This website is useful for you if you're looking at a specific location that you want to travel to. That website has a lot of information about any destination's nightlife events. You have things for festivals, you have workshops, classes. So there's a lot of stuff there that you can already purchase tickets for in advance and already help you reserve stuff that you might want to be doing. And then lastly here for a website resource, never underestimate the power of Google search terms. think about the things that you really want to do, and then add the location in that search term. So for example, I was going to Portland and I knew I really wanted to see if there was anything that had to do with horror or Halloween available to us as like a nightlife experience. What do you know? Portland actually has a permanent Halloween themed bar, and they also have mixology classes that are also like part, you know, make your cocktail, part theater. It was just the coolest experience. And it also had like a breakout room portion in the beginning. It was just the coolest thing I've literally ever done. And I wouldn't have known that if I didn't search ahead of time, Halloween bar, Portland. My second suggestion for my dark tourists out there who love horror and Halloween is definitely to Google search if there are any ghost tours, specifically walking tours, in your local community or wherever you're traveling to. You would be surprised how many cities and towns have their own walking ghost tours. Some of them are more historical in nature. Some of them will provide you with actual like ghost hunting tools. Some are more focused on like true crime. Some even allow you to like kind of hop on, hop off buses or trolleys or cars. There's so much. There's even like underground tours. So think about like the city or the place that you're going to, what is available. The thing I love about ghost tours in general is that it is an awesome way to get to know a new location. So typically for me, I always like to book any kind of ghost tour earlier in my trip itinerary. And a good ghost tour will be full of historical information that helps you contextualize the space that you are a guest within. Here's where that best practice of critically assessing the educator in that space and the information they're giving you is super key. Because I've had some really amazing ghost tours, and then I've had some really awful ones. The best ghost tours include acknowledging the indigenous communities of that area and help understand the settlement process and that development over time. And then they take us to different sites that have a little bit to do with, you know, ghost hunting, ghost sightings, that kind of experience. They even dive into a little bit of like true crime and some unsolved mysteries that might have happened in the area. But the entirety of the trip is really based heavily in historical information. Personally, I'm not a believer of ghosts and all that kind of stuff, but I love a good story. And I feel like ghost walking tours are really fun ways of being able to experience a new space and get to know it a little bit more. But I'm always that person that is, you know, silently critiquing the teller of all this information. And there are some really great books that I have already read, or they are on my TBR to get to when I'm in more of a nonfiction mood, that dive into that intersection of tourism and history. One book I would love to recommend to anybody who either lives or is going to be visiting any kind of southern state is going to be Tales from the Haunted South, Dark Tourism and Memories of Slavery from the Civil War by Taya Miles. I read this book last April when I was getting ready to go on my birthday trip to New Orleans. Taya Miles is an awesome academic who is well-versed in history, specifically African-American history. And it's a really cool book because it's part travelogue, part like historical investigation where she's interrogating all the claims that really famous ghost tours in the South claim about certain people and the stories that they tell and why they might be telling them in the ways that they do. So in many ways, she's debunking really famous ghost tours or sites that claim to be haunted. And it's a really quick read, but I feel like she accomplishes so much, and I think this helped me approach a lot of the dark tourist sites and experiences I encountered in New Orleans when I visited with more of a critical eye. My third tip is going to be for those who enjoy a really active nightlife and you maybe like to partake in some adult beverages. You would be surprised at how many horror or Halloween pop-up bars there are around October. Or that there might be permanent establishments whose theme is a horror or Halloween topic. Especially in the October months, if you're gonna be traveling somewhere or even in your own community, I would highly encourage you, if you like a good cocktail, to search any Halloween or horror pop-up bars that are in your area. There's one in my town that I love to go to every year that does an overlay. It is part arcade, part craft cocktail bar that is high volume. I don't know how they do it, but they make really intricate, delicious cocktails in an amazingly decorated setting for so many people. So I would just search up the town and add, Halloween or horror pop-up bar, and you might see a lot of really awesome things for you there to schedule in on your adventures. My fourth suggestion is to visit cemeteries on your travels or in your local communities. As a history lover, there is quite a bit to be learned at a cemetery. If you just wanted to enjoy a picnic there or read, that is an option too, especially if you have a really cool historic one in your area. Also, many cemeteries do have events at their sites. I always love to search up before I go to a historic cemetery. I'd like to search up the cemetery itself, and also even its Wikipedia page has some information about quote unquote notable people who are interred at that site. Oftentimes you'll see me at a cemetery just Google searching information because I saw this really cool mausoleum or gravestone and it just got me curious about the person. Thinking about cemeteries, there is one book that is on my TBR that I have not gotten to, but I have it right here. It is called Over My Dead Body: Unearthing the Hidden History of America's Cemeteries by Greg Melville. I have not read this one yet, but I've heard a lot of really great things about it. He is not an academic, so I'll kind of take that with a grain of salt. He has a bibliography here, so he's citing his stuff, and that's the first thing I look at when I am assessing whether or not I should pick up a book or not, is if they actually cite sources, they have a bibliography, all that stuff. Another tip for my horror and Halloween lovers who want to bring those vibes into their travel life is to think about any museum exhibits that might touch on some macabre or dark topics. More recently, I visited Portland, and at one of their really huge, awesome museums, they have an exhibit about horror movies. I specifically went to that museum because I wanted to experience that one exhibit. I thought it did a really good job of making things interactive. They also had items from movies, memorabilia, props. They had great places for photo ops. It was really cool to experience, and I really recommend it. It's really quick. So museums typically are things you don't want to dedicate the whole day to, which is nice. It just gives you a little dose of those vibes. And then also knowing that there's a room full of other people who are just as interested in this topic as you is awesome to experience. My sixth tip is looking at local landmarks that are historic in nature or are even advertised as being haunted or associated with the true crime world. Despite the fact that you're in the same location exploring one site, definitely keep your critical eyes wide open because, again, a lot of these businesses are trying to flip a buck. They gotta make a profit. That's just how it is. And so in the process of doing that, historical integrity, evidence-based claims might not be prioritized as much as if you're getting something from a historical society that is not so reliant on making a profit when they're creating their narratives or their scripts that they're then sharing with the public. And then also thinking ethically about what we're getting told, whose stories we are focusing on, who is being excluded from the narratives, what that then says about us as a society. I find that incredibly fascinating, and I've read one book that I think really dives into some of America's most haunted locations through this critical lens that has just helped me sharpen my own. And that book is Ghostland: An American History in Haunted Places by Colin Dickey. I love this book because it's very accessible in its language. I do not believe he is a historian in any kind of, academic training sense, but he does do a really good job of affirming a lot of what I know historians have talked about and discussed and citing that within his work. One of my favorite sections of this book focuses on debunking and challenging popular myths and narratives about Sarah Winchester. You know her, she's that crazy spiritualist lady who built a mega house because the ghosts told her to. This helps me really keep the, actual reality center stage. If you're a horror movie fan, you probably would want to visit the site of some of your favorites. So also thinking about Google searching if there are any locations for movies that you love that are going to be around the places that you are going to be traveling to. Or better yet, maybe they even actually have tours or people who take you out to those places. I have a local site, Santa Cruz, where Lost Boys was filmed, so going to those places is always a really fun thing I love to do in the summertime. My last suggestion for you as you're planning for your trips is to investigate, aka Google search, some local lore or stories about the area ahead of time. What are some really popular ghost stories about that city? Are there any cryptids associated with that area? And then are there experiences available to you, either visiting sites, cemetery plots, going on tours that will allow you to get to know this information a little bit more. And then thinking about the information that you found, Is it causing more harm than good for you to investigate those places or those histories or stories? Is it actually educational, or is it more like you're paying somebody that is allowing you to like gawk at other people's pain or traumas? Local lore is something that does get commodified. And so as somebody like myself who loves a good story, you know, I don't think cryptids exist, but I love thinking about, you know, the possibility of it. It's just like a fun story. It's kind of like an extension of a movie or a book that's just like more real life. And you know, when I visited Portland, I did see that in that area of like the Pacific Northwest, there's like Sasquatch tours you can go on like deep in the woods. There's like boating outings that people will take you on to go to the places where Bigfoot sightings supposedly took place, and maybe, you know, you get a glimpse of him yourself. So there are all these people who are trying to make money off of local lore. You may or may not, based off your interests and you weighing the ethics of you engaging in these activities. You may want to pursue them, you may not. I didn't really set out to make such a serious video about Halloween and horror travel advice. I guess I'm just a person that is hyper aware of my positionality and how my actions might impact others. And it makes sense how that's like generally just who I am, how that will then cross over into how I am as a traveler. I'd love to know your favorite dark tourist destination. And if you made it all the way to the end of this video, definitely leave a little airplane emoji down below in the comments. I will see you all in my next video. Bye.